Hello, everyone. This is my presentation for our schizophrenic disorder unit. My study was about cognitive neuropsychiatry, and it was about the frontotemporal hyperactivity during a reality monitoring program is associated with delusions in patients with schizophrenia spectrum disorders. That was literally the title. It kind of sounded weird, but anyways. And it's by C. Thorstein and his colleagues. Okay, introduction. So, defining schizophrenia. So, schizophrenia is a serious and debilitating brain and behavior condition that affects one's thoughts, feelings, and actions. As we learned in class, one of the main symptoms, I guess, and really like one of the main like debilitating factors is psychosis. Psychotic symptoms tend to be one of the main features of schizophrenia. It's characterized by distortions and loss of contact with reality. One, as you probably know, may experience hallucinations and delusions, and it impairs their perceptions of what is real and what is not. The problem being addressed. So, there are many factors that contribute to the production of delusions within schizophrenia. The study that I had really focused on the impairment between monitoring internally and externally generated information. So, it's just reality monitoring, so deciphering what is real and what's not. This is mainly a part of the misidentification of the origin of memory by a person making the memory recall. So basically, a lot of this has to do with misattribution. So if you see that word a lot, that's basically what it means. Previous research. So it's been unclear how impaired monitoring process might contribute to the development of delusions. Explanatory models that see delusions as a deficit process propose that delusions emerge and persist as a result of breakdown in one or more normal belief generation processes. Two functional magnetic resonance imaging, aka fMRI, studies have investigated the hypothesis of a weakened monitoring and processing of internally generated information in patients with schizophrenia. So basically, this study itself was it kind of followed up on the fMRI studies, and they basically focused their findings within the area of the brain, like the hippocampal area. But I'll get more into that later. So the purpose and hypothesis. So the purpose of C. Thorstein's research was to look into the neural correlates of monitoring processes and see if they were linked to delusions. There wasn't any specific hypothesis, but the question, as I kind of states in the purpose, was being asked was what exactly were the neural correlates correlated to delusions. So basically, they really just wanted to see where in the brain are these delusions, like what part of the brain is activated when one comes up with such ideas. Mythology. So participants. There was 21 participants. In all there were 42 participants. 21 with some type of schizophrenia. They all had different subtypes, so they weren't of one specific diagnosis. And then there was 21 healthy controls. The exclusion criteria included a history of head injury, a neurological disorder, and an IQ's less than 70. And they didn't want anybody under the age of 18 or over the age of 65. They were assessed by trained psychologists and clinical psychologists and diagnosed via the DSM for Axis 1 disorder. The procedure. The experiment consisted of an encoding and monitoring process. During the encoding process, individuals were given statements that described a scene or an object. Following the statement, the subjects were shown either a photo, which was a viewed condition they called it the VC, or a magenta frame prompting them to create an imaginary scene linked with the picture, which they called the imagined condition. They were provided with statements from previously viewed imagined conditions as well as new statements. during the monitoring session, which took place within an MRI scanner. So they were actually viewing their brains as they did this. The objective was for the participants to identify the correct source of the statement in total. And here's a picture of basically what they did. As you can see, like, in the viewed condition, it would say playing chess. And then they see a picture of someone playing chess. And then it would either be pleasant or not pleasant. And then the imagined condition, they would see swimming fish. And then basically, they would see the words. And then basically in that magenta screen, they would basically just, I guess, like, it would be whatever came to mind first. Or, like, something like... It sounds kind of confusing, but that's basically what it was. Okay, continued procedure. So during the monitoring task, all trials were then randomized and split into 2 sessions. The individuals were told not to answer if they thought a statement was new. So fixation crosses that were jittered in time were used to monitor the trials. Both the encoding and monitoring sessions had the correct response option, and the 2 monitoring sessions were counterbalanced across the experiment. Measures. So as I mentioned, a lot of this was MRI based. So participants were scanned using a 3TGE Signa HDH scanner, so probably a really fancy MRI machine. And then they had behavioral analysis, which was basically their response and accuracy times were recorded. And Mann-Whitney U-tests were performed to compare the 2 groups, and Spearman-Rowe RS was used to correlate accuracy and symptom ratings. So the fMRI data analysis, so basically spatial and temporal processing was conducted using SPM8, which I had to look up because they didn't say it in the study, but it's basically just a statistics thingy. And the voxel-wise ROI analysis was used to perform to see what area of the brain was most significantly affected. Results. Okay, so the behavioral data, there was no difference between the groups of item recognition. There was a significant difference between the 2 groups with the imagined condition, where those, as one was probably inferred with schizophrenia, showed lower accuracy. There was also no significant differences between the groups in the viewed condition, so they both did pretty well on that. The differences between the groups were due to the schizophrenic patients making more misattributions, like I stated before. They basically didn't see what the others saw, like especially in the imagined conditions, like what they saw, like if they said it was a swimming fish, they probably saw, like, I don't know, maybe there was like frogs there or something like that. I don't know, but they didn't really state that, which I thought was kind of odd. But anyways, they were making more misattributions when they would classify the view and image conditions, and there was no differences in the accuracy with the medicated and non-medicated patients, which they didn't state it before as an exclusionary criteria, but I'll get into that later. Okay, the results. So basically, I had a little trouble reading the results because I am no scientist, but this is what I gathered from it. And there's also pictures here, and the pictures kind of help me understand it because I was so confused. But the voxel-wise RI analyses showed that both groups displayed significant activations in ROIs. And basically, an ROI is the region of something, but it's basically where the activity is, like the main activity, like of the brain, is like popping out. Because they also didn't state what that was in the study. And I was like, okay. But anyways, the analysis showed that the left hippocampal activity presented in both of the imagined and viewed correlation were both associated with delusions. Discussion. Okay, so overall the results of this study showed that patients with schizophrenia spectrum disorders displayed reduced performance in identifying the origin of internally generated information. The increased misattribution, aka the origin of memory recall, was due to an abnormal activation pattern within the left region of the hippocampus. The most substantial finding was the association between hippocampal response with the severity of the delusions. The results also showed that the hippocampal response was associated with the severity of delusions independent of the monitoring condition. Lastly, the limitations. So even like when I first read like this, I didn't really notice, like, obviously I haven't really read many studies that pertain to like MRI imaging and stuff like that. But even when I read the like when they were talking about the subjects, I noticed there was a very small sample size, and I thought that was kind of weird. And a lot of things were left out. Like the group was heterogeneous, so basically like they all had schizophrenia, but they all had different subtypes, and not all were as severe as the other. So I feel like that could have really impacted results, because obviously one's brain's not going to have the same activation as someone with more severe um, schizophrenia. Um, but they largely mentioned it as like psychotic disorders, and like they didn't mention any other form of psychotic disorder. So it was kind of weird how they did that. And then because I'm sure they would all have different outcomes. And the other thing that kind of confused me, not all of the patients had to be like who had schizophrenia had to be medicated. Basically they had both medicated and non-medicated patients. And I feel like that could have really impacted the results, because obviously if someone's being treated, like their brain is being not tampered with, but like something's influencing, obviously, what they're like they're reducing like the stimulation and whatnot. So basically, I feel like that was the biggest limitation of this study. But other than that, these are my references, and thank you for watching/listening.